look at this little white guy and tell me, what is he feeling? Is there joy behind these eyes? Depression? Is it unrelentless rage? Okay, what about this little white guy? What is the gender here? How old is this character? Well, the beauty of these little white guys, which we find as the protagonists in so many games, is that you don't know. There's not much detail to these characters. They wear minimal clothing, if any at all. They hardly have expressions. They don't speak. They probably don't even have dialogue. So when you design a character like this, you are intentionally choosing to not tell the player who this is. And that opens the door for so many cool things to happen in the player experience. Seriously, there is a lot that we're gonna talk about today. You ready? Because this guy is literally a blank canvas, but the environment he's usually in is the opposite of that. Notice how the games that use little white guys as the protagonists are also the games that are very environment focused. When you play Hollow Knight, you're dropped into this big old world with a bunch of different colors and regions and shining crystals, bouncing mushrooms, the decaying city of an old civilization. But in the midst of all of that, you are a silent little white figure. And it's the same thing with Rainworld, right? Rainworld is very harsh, it's industrial, it's kind of alien, and the predators that walk around trying to kill you are pretty scary. But amidst it all, you are a little marshmallow. Well, you're not a marshmallow, but you're a slug cat. These characters are designed to feel small in the big worlds that they find themselves in. So because these characters are so small and blank and simple, they're brought to life by the environments that they're in, rather than their own characterization. You know, you see the big, ripped, AAA muscle man protagonist, and you know off rip exactly who this person is. You can tell a lot about him from the clothes that he's wearing, the marks that are on him. You can look at the sounds he makes and the things he literally directly says. There is so much you know about this person just by witnessing them in the very first scene of the game. But even when you look at the first opening cutscene of Hollow Knight, for example, you don't get that at all. Instead of giving you the protagonist, showing you who they are exactly, and then revealing and building the world around them, it's the other way around with these little white guys. You are a blank slate, but you find your identity through the world and how you move through it and how you interact with it. That's what tells you who you are. Let me give you an example. So think of the way that the slug cat from Rainworld moves. You are not told that the slug cat is vulnerable or scared, but because of the way that it flops around the world, and because you're hiding from enemies instead of chasing them or fighting them, you can infer that. Same kind of thing with the vessel in Hollow Knight. The little bounces when this guy walks, the way that you can look up and down at the environment, the way that other characters respond to him and treat him, that is what makes this character feel alive. It's literally the whole idea of showing instead of telling, but taking it to a whole new level. It's kind of like negative space in design, right? You are intentionally removing things or removing detail in order to tell a story more effectively. Whereas in a game like God of War, which is what I showed you earlier, it's much more about the visual intricacies of the design. Now, something like Hollow Knight is obviously a bit more restrictive because of the art style, but even in something that is a cutscene where you have the most opportunity to show detail and show emotion, it still doesn't, because it is still, at its core, just a little white guy. Do you guys get why I like video games so much? Isn't this stuff so cool? But you know what's even cooler? Today's sponsor, Exter. Are you like me and you have too much money? Oh my gosh, like where do you even begin to put it? Well, lucky for you guys, I have 3 friends that I'm gonna introduce you guys to today. First up is Kara. She's my card holder pro. She's sleek, she's small, she fits in female pockets, guys. That's right, she's for the girls. And she holds up to 14 cards. My favorite part about this wallet is that you're never going to be fumbling around trying to find your cards, because all you have to do is press this little metal ejector trigger and then voila. Now this is Percy. He's my Parliament wallet. He's very classy, very businessman. He also does the little fun push-pop type thing. He's made out of environmentally certified leather and he blocks RFID chip reading, so you're not going to be stolen from wirelessly. Now on the back of Percy is where I keep Freya. She's my finder card. She makes sure that I don't lose my wallet, basically. I can see her location at any time on my phone. I can make her ring and make a sound. And if I go away from her for too long, she will send me notifications, so I don't have to worry about losing my wallet. If you go to partner.extra.com/juniperdev, you're gonna get 32% off site-wide, and you can use code Juniper to get an additional 10% off. It doesn't matter if you're wanting a Kara or a Percy or a Freya, I got you. Thank you, Extra, for sponsoring, and let's get back to talking about our favorite white guys. Nope, that is not right. Our favorite little video game white characters. All these characters are pretty dang minimal, you know, blank slate, like we said. You have a uniquely shaped white body and some black eyes, and usually that's kind of it. It kind of reminds me of modern art, or minimalist art specifically. Minimalism as an art style popped up around the 1960s in America, and it was a rejection to the previous movement, which was abstract expressionism. This is what abstract expressionism could look like. It was all about expressing the intangible, because there were rarely concrete objects being drawn, but it was more so about portraying emotion through brushstrokes and shapes. It was very spontaneous and very colorful. Now, minimalism, on the other hand, is a highly purified form of art. It's about breaking things down to their fundamental elements and stripping away everything else so that the only thing you're left with is the core truth. If we look at our little white guys and we see them the same way, it's kind of beautiful. They are a simple, minimalistic truth that exists within a much broader and more emotional world. And that's what minimalism is all about, especially because of the emphasis that that kind of art has on shape. Minimalist art uses a lot of basic geometric shapes, and even when it is more complex, it still has that emphasis on the form of a figure. It's about how much object that shape exists. What am I saying? It's about how much shape. The shape goes into a shape press that is then pressed into a press shape. The shape of the protagonist in these games is the most defining feature that you have. It's what makes these otherwise mostly white blobs genuinely iconic and memorable. Ori has a soft and rounded silhouette that feels very fast and nimble, which fits with the platforming in the game. The slug cat kind of has a lack of a shape, but you know, you do got some motion in that ocean. Omori, or Sunny's shape, is pretty basic and unexaggerated for a human, which makes sense because the whole story is like he's just a person. And the story is grounded in the weight of being human and everything that that means emotionally. Those shapes, plus everything external to the character that we talked about earlier, are what makes these little white guys sorry, it's kind of funny when I say this. That's what makes these white guys special, and it makes them a really cool study of design. And hey, if you really want to suck every possible ounce of meaning out of this art metaphor, you could probably make the argument that simplistic, minimal character design is a rejection of the increasingly realistic models that we've been getting over the past 10 years, in the same way that minimalism was a rejection to abstract expressionism. Perhaps. Anyway, I don't know how we've gotten this far without talking about the actual color of these characters, so let's do that. Simplistic character design is one thing, but it is funny that all these characters are also specifically white. Not just minimal, but fully devoid of color. I just did a video on the psychology of color in games, so I won't dive too deep into that, but our brain does associate different colors with different things. Mind-blowing. A character that has a lot of red on it is going to be seen as more aggressive, and a golden object is going to be seen as valuable. But white doesn't really always provoke the same emotional response, if it has one at all. In some contexts, it can represent purity, new beginnings, innocence, but in other situations, it can feel very cold and sterile and unwelcoming. And that's what's cool about these little white guys. White doesn't give them an emotion, but it does amplify the emotion of whatever space that they're in. If the world is soft and glowing, then they feel kind of angelic, which is how I feel about Ori. But if our space is more bleak and borderline disassociative, like it is in Omori, now our character feels apathetic and cold. Does this apply to all colors? You know, maybe, but I do think it's definitely more so the case for white. It also has to do with the fact that white allows more space for the viewer to create their own interpretations, and thus the emotions you feel from these little white guys. In the same way that their designs don't really do a lot to tell you anything about the character, they also don't tell you how to feel. As human beings, we are hardwired to look to other people to know how to feel in a situation if we don't know. If you have a baby, this is really weird without having something here. If you have a baby and that baby gets hurt, it's gonna look to the parent to know how to respond. It's like a known parenting thing that like, if you react negatively and go like, oh, are you okay? Then the baby's gonna start crying. But if the parent is more nonchalant, then the baby is way less likely to actually react. Humans are highly empathetic creatures in that way. And in games that do have expressive characters, we will look to them to know how to feel in a situation. Are they anxious? Are they in pain? Well, that visual representation is going to make you as a player also feel more anxious. So when you have a little white guy, and there's none of that to read, you are forced to rely on your own feelings and your own readings of the situation, which makes it an even more personal experience that connects you as a person to this little white guy as a character way more than you ever would be otherwise. Okay? Now, your visibly angry, hyper-realistic protagonist, who is also designed to portray a very specific identity with how they dress and act, doesn't really give you that same freedom to explore the characterization yourself. This character is reacting to the game world themselves, independent of you.
Oh.
And then you feel something from watching them. But these little white guys don't let you do that, and now the burden of emotion is placed upon you. You have to decide what is scary and what is sad and what matters. Does that system make the narratives in these little white guy games hit harder? I don't know, I think it depends. For some people, yes, absolutely, but for other people, they might connect more when they can empathize and see the visible emotion of a character instead of project their own onto it. I think that there's maybe two types of players, and maybe that has to do with what stories resonate most with different people. And I don't think that either one is necessarily better or worse. You could definitely say that AAA games or more realistic games rely more on empathy for storytelling, whereas indie titles appeal to more relatability, and that's why they typically have simpler character designs. But obviously there's a budget difference that goes into that, and indie's a pretty big umbrella. And no matter what, it feels like realism is always the goal in games, and I don't really get that. I think a big point I want to make with this video is that there is so much beauty in the absence of things in games, or in the simplicity of design. In the absence of color and expression and visual detail, there is still so much room to tell a story and to feel as a player. All the super realistic, true-to-life intricacies that make a game like GTA great are great, but so is the minimalism that trusts you to interpret all the unknowns about a character. If it isn't clear enough, I really like indie games because I find that they demonstrate that the most, or at least they draw the most attention to it. But who knows, maybe we'll start getting some little white guys in AAA games, or maybe I'm just not thinking about little white guys in AAA. But either way, that's everything I have to say about little white guys. You should tell me in the comments, who is your favorite white guy? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!